What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to find himself in the crosshairs of a host determined to turn entertainment into confrontation? Today, we're diving into the explosive encounter that had everyone talking, where Harrison Ford's calm professionalism met Joy Behar's relentless provocation in a way that nobody saw coming. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrity interviews getting this heated. The studio lights were blazing as Harrison Ford settled into his chair on The View's iconic set. At 79 years old, the legendary actor had done thousands of interviews, promoting everything from Star Wars to Indiana Jones to his latest projects. He knew the drill, expected the usual questions about his career, maybe some light banter about his famous characters. What he didn't expect was to walk into what felt more like an interrogation than an interview. Whoopi Goldberg, serving as the show's moderator, started things off with her trademark warmth. "Harrison, it's so great to have you here. You've been entertaining audiences for decades. Tell us about your new project." Ford, dressed in his characteristic casual blazer, leaned back slightly and gave that familiar half-smile that had charmed audiences since the 70s. "Well, Whoopi, it's a passion project I've been working on for years," Ford began, his voice carrying that distinctive, gravelly tone. "It's about environmental conservation, something I care deeply about. We're telling stories that matter, stories about our planet's future." Sarah Haynes jumped in next, her enthusiasm genuine. "That's amazing, Harrison. Your commitment to environmental causes is well documented. How do you balance your Hollywood career with your activism?" Ford nodded appreciatively. "It's not about balance, Sarah. It's about integration. Everything I do, whether it's flying my planes, working on my ranch, or choosing film projects, I try to consider the environmental impact. We have a responsibility." Sunny Hostin leaned forward, clearly engaged. "Speaking of responsibility, your portrayal of iconic characters has influenced generations. Do you feel the weight of that legacy?" "I do," Ford replied thoughtfully. "When you play characters like Han Solo or Indiana Jones, you realize they become part of people's lives, their childhoods, their dreams. That's not something I take lightly." The conversation was flowing naturally, exactly the kind of engaging discussion that made for good television. Alyssa Farah Griffin smiled warmly as she prepared her question. "Harrison, you've worked with some incredible directors over the years. Who has influenced you the most?" Ford's eyes lit up slightly. "George Lucas obviously changed my life, but I've learned something from every director I've worked with. Ridley Scott, Steven Spielberg, each brings something unique. The key is staying open, staying curious." Ana Navarro chimed in with a laugh. "And staying handsome apparently doesn't hurt either. You've aged like fine wine, Harrison." Ford chuckled, that rare genuine laugh that his fans loved. "Well, Ana, I think that's more about good lighting and talented cinematographers than anything I'm doing." The panel was clearly enjoying themselves, and Ford seemed relaxed, engaged, even charming in his typically understated way. But then Joy Behar, who had been unusually quiet up to this point, suddenly shifted in her seat. There was something different in her expression, a sharpness that hadn't been there moments before. "Harrison," Joy said, her voice cutting through the light-hearted atmosphere like a blade, "let's talk about something real for a minute. You've made millions playing these heroic characters, but what about your real life? What about the controversies?" The shift was so sudden, so jarring, that the other hosts exchanged quick glances. Ford's expression didn't change, but there was a subtle stiffening in his posture. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Joy." "Oh, come on." Joy pressed, leaning forward aggressively. "The plane incidents. The environmental hypocrisy of someone who owns multiple aircraft lecturing us about carbon footprints. Don't you think that's a bit rich?" Whoopi immediately tried to intervene. "Joy, maybe we should." "No, Whoopi." Joy cut her off sharply. "This is exactly the kind of Hollywood double standard that people are tired of. Here's a guy who flies private jets for fun telling us to worry about the environment. Where's the accountability?" Ford's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained measured. "Joy, I think you're mischaracterizing both my environmental work and my aviation activities. I've been involved in search and rescue operations. I've used my flying skills to help people. As for environmental impact, I've offset my carbon footprint many times over through my conservation work." "Offset," Joy repeated mockingly. That's convenient. Pay some money, and suddenly your private jet hobby is environmentally friendly? Do you hear yourself? The tension in the studio was becoming palpable. Sarah Haynes looked uncomfortable, clearly wanting to redirect the conversation. Maybe we could talk about Harrison's upcoming projects. No, Sarah. Joy interrupted again, her voice rising. I want to hear Harrison explain how flying around in private jets for decades is somehow consistent with environmental activism. I want to hear how that works. Ford's famous composure was beginning to crack, though he was still maintaining his dignity. Joy, I don't think you're interested in a real conversation about environmental policy or conservation efforts. You seem more interested in creating conflict than understanding the issues. Creating conflict? Joy's voice pitched higher. I'm asking legitimate questions that your fans deserve answers to. But I guess when you're used to softball interviews and people kissing your ring, real questions feel like attacks. Sonny Hostin tried to step in. Joy, I think Harrison has been very thoughtful in his responses. Thoughtful? Joy snapped, now clearly agitated. Thoughtful would be not lecturing people about the environment while living like an environmental disaster himself. Thoughtful would be some honesty instead of this polished Hollywood BS. The studio had gone completely silent except for Joy's voice. Ford sat back in his chair, his expression now clearly showing his displeasure. Joy, I came here to have a conversation about my work, my passion for environmental conservation, and to connect with your audience. I didn't come here to be ambushed or to defend lifestyle choices that you've clearly already made up your mind about. Ambushed? Joy laughed harshly. This is called journalism, Harrison. Maybe you're not used to it anymore, but some of us still believe in asking real questions instead of just promoting whatever movie you're selling. The other hosts were now visibly uncomfortable. Whoopi was shaking her head. Ana Navarro was looking down at her notes, and Alyssa Farah-Griffin appeared to be trying to signal someone off camera. But Joy wasn't finished. You know what your problem is, Harrison? Joy continued, her voice dripping with disdain. You think because you played some beloved characters that you're above criticism. You think you can lecture everyone else while living in your privileged bubble, and nobody should dare question the contradictions. Ford's patience was clearly wearing thin. The man who had faced down fictional villains on screen was now dealing with a very real antagonist, and his legendary restraint was being tested to its limits. Joy, I think you've made your point. Multiple times. Can we move on to something constructive? Constructive? Joy let out another harsh laugh. What's constructive is calling out hypocrisy when we see it. What's constructive is not letting celebrities use their platforms to virtue signal while doing the exact opposite in their personal lives. Whoopi finally found her voice, speaking with the authority that came from years of managing difficult moments on live television. Joy, I think we need to take this down a notch. Harrison is our guest, and our guest who thinks he can come on here and preach at us. Joy shot back, not even looking at Whoopi. I'm tired of being lectured by people who live in glass houses. Harrison, you want to talk about environmental responsibility? Let's talk about your carbon footprint compared to an average American family. Let's talk about real numbers instead of feel-good platitudes. Ford leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge that his fans rarely heard. Joy, since you seem so interested in real numbers, let me give you some. My foundation has preserved over 50,000 acres of wilderness. We've funded renewable energy projects across 3 continents. I've donated millions to environmental causes. What have you done lately besides attack people on television? The studio went dead silent. Even Joy seemed momentarily taken aback by Ford's direct counterattack. But she recovered quickly, her voice rising to an almost shrill pitch. So now we're comparing charitable contributions? That's your defense? Write some checks, and suddenly you're environmental Jesus. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Maybe we should take a commercial break. No. Joy snapped. I want Harrison to explain to our viewers how his lifestyle is anything other than complete environmental hypocrisy. I want him to explain how flying private jets is somehow saving the planet. Ford stood up slowly, his tall frame casting a shadow across the table. The movement was deliberate, controlled, but there was no mistaking the message. Joy, I've tried to have a respectful conversation with you. I've answered your questions, even though they were clearly designed to provoke rather than inform. But I'm done being your punching bag. Sitting down, Joy demanded, her voice now fully confrontational. We're not finished here. Actually, we are, Ford replied, his voice calm but firm. I came here to talk about meaningful work, about projects that matter. You've turned this into a personal attack, and I won't participate in that anymore. Sonny Hostin tried desperately to salvage the situation. Harrison, please, Joy sometimes gets passionate about these issues, but we'd love to hear more about your conservation work. Passionate? Ford interrupted, looking directly at Sonny. There's a difference between passion and hostility, Sonny. There's a difference between asking tough questions and looking for a fight. Joy was now practically vibrating with anger. Looking for a fight? You're the one who came on here with your holier-than-thou attitude, expecting everyone to bow down to your celebrity wisdom. Well, excuse me for not being impressed. I never asked you to be impressed, Joy, Ford replied, his voice deadly quiet. I asked you to be professional. Apparently, that's too much to ask. The insult hit its mark. Joy's face flushed red, and when she spoke, her voice was shaking with rage. Professional? You want to talk about professional? Professional is not thinking you're above answering questions just because you're Harrison Ford. Professional is not storming off when someone challenges your narrative. I'm not storming off, Ford said evenly. I'm choosing not to engage with someone who's more interested in creating television drama than having an actual conversation. Whoopi made one final attempt to regain control. Harrison, Joy, can we please just take a step back here? We're all adults. We can work through this. No. Whoopi. Joy cut her off for the third time. I'm not backing down from this. Harrison thinks he can intimidate me by standing up, by using his movie star presence to shut down legitimate criticism. Well, I've got news for you. Han Solo, this isn't one of your movies, and I'm not some villain you can defeat with a smirk and a one-liner. Ford actually smiled at that, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. You're right, Joy. This isn't a movie. In a movie, the antagonist usually has some kind of point to make beyond just being unpleasant. The barb landed perfectly. Joy's mouth fell open, and for a moment, she was actually speechless. Ana Navarro seized the opportunity to try and redirect. Harrison, your environmental work really is impressive. Can you tell us about the specific projects you're most proud of? But Ford was no longer looking at Ana. His attention was fixed on Joy, who was clearly struggling to formulate a response to his cutting remark. Joy, I've spent 40 years in this business dealing with difficult people, demanding directors, impossible schedules, and high-pressure situations. But I've rarely encountered someone so determined to be unpleasant for no apparent reason. Joy found her voice again, and it was venomous. Unpleasant. I'm unpleasant because I won't kiss your ring like everyone else. Because I won't pretend your environmental activism isn't completely undermined by your lifestyle choices. You're unpleasant, Ford replied with devastating calm, because you've turned what should have been a conversation into an interrogation. You're unpleasant because you seem incapable of listening to answers that don't fit your predetermined narrative. And you're unpleasant because you've made your colleagues visibly uncomfortable with your behavior. That last comment clearly stung. Joy glanced around the table and saw the truth in Ford's words written on every face. Whoopi was rubbing her temples. Sarah was staring at her hands. Sonny looked mortified. Anna seemed to be studying the ceiling. And Alyssa appeared to be contemplating a career change. Don't you dare, Joy hissed, her voice now low and dangerous. Try to turn my colleagues against me. This is between you and me, Harrison. Don't drag them into your tantrum. Ford's eyebrows rose slightly. My tantrum? Joy, I've remained calm and civil throughout this entire exchange. You're the one who's been shouting, interrupting, and turning what should have been a pleasant interview into whatever this is. This is accountability. Joy shot back, her voice rising again. This is what happens when someone actually asks you real questions instead of softball garbage about your latest movie. You can't handle it because you're used to everyone treating you like royalty. Real questions? Ford repeated, his voice taking on that dangerous, quiet tone again. Joy, you haven't asked me a single substantive question about environmental policy, conservation science, or any of the actual work I do. You've made accusations, you've attacked my character, and you've been consistently hostile. That's not journalism. That's just bad television. The comparison to bad television hit Joy like a physical blow. She prided herself on her interviewing skills, on her ability to get answers from difficult guests. Being told by Harrison Ford that she was producing bad television was perhaps the worst insult he could have delivered. Bad television. Joy's Voice cracked slightly. I've been doing this for decades, Harrison. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, the biggest names in entertainment. I don't need some actor telling me how to do my job. Then maybe you should start acting like it, Ford replied coldly. Because right now, you're acting like someone who's more interested in creating conflict than getting information. Whoopi finally managed to break through the tension. Okay, everyone, I think we need to take a breath here. Harrison, Joy, you're both passionate people, and sometimes passionate people clash, but Whoopi, I appreciate what you're trying to do, Ford interrupted gently, his tone completely different when addressing her. But I think Joy has made it clear that she's not interested in having a productive conversation. I'm not going to sit here and be her verbal punching bag for your audience's entertainment. Joy exploded. Verbal punching bag? You arrogant, entitled piece of Hollywood garbage. You think you can come on my show, act all superior, and then play the victim when someone doesn't bow down to you? You're pathetic. The studio fell into shocked silence. Even by the View's standards, Joy's outburst was extreme. Ford stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was ice cold. Joy, I've worked with some difficult people in my career. I've dealt with temperamental directors, demanding producers, and high-maintenance co-stars. But in 40 years in this business, I don't think I've ever encountered someone so committed to being unpleasant as you are right now. Get out, Joy snarled, pointing toward the exit. If you can't handle real questions, if you can't handle being challenged, then get out. We don't need you here. Ford smiled, and this time it was genuine amusement. Joy, you don't get to kick me out. This isn't your show, it's The View. There are 4 other women at this table who might have something to say about that. All eyes turned to the other hosts. Whoopi looked torn between her loyalty to her colleague and her responsibility as moderator. Sarah Haynes appeared to be in shock. Sunny Hostin was clearly mortified by Joy's behavior. Anna Navarro looked angry, but not at Ford. Alyssa Farah Griffin seemed to be calculating whether this would help or hurt her career. Joy, Whoopi said carefully, maybe we should. No, Whoopi. Joy cut her off once again. This is exactly what's wrong with celebrity culture. These people think they can do whatever they want, say whatever they want, and face no consequences. Well, I'm giving him consequences. Ford shook his head slowly. Joy, the only person here who's facing consequences is you. You've embarrassed yourself, you've embarrassed your colleagues, and you've turned what should have been an enjoyable interview into a spectacle. I'm embarrassed. Joy laughed wildly. I'm embarrassed. You're the one who can't answer simple questions about your hypocrisy. You're the one who's having a meltdown on live television. I'm having a meltdown. Ford's voice remained calm, which somehow made his words more devastating. Joy, I'm standing here speaking in complete sentences while you're screaming at me and calling me garbage on your own show. If anyone's having a meltdown, it's not me. The truth of that statement was undeniable. Ford looked completely composed, if clearly done with the situation, while Joy was red-faced, wild-eyed, and clearly out of control. That's it, Joy declared, standing up abruptly. I'm done with this. Security. Ford actually laughed at that. Security? Joy, what exactly are you going to tell security? That I answered your questions too calmly? That I didn't get angry enough? When you attacked me? You're disrupting my show, Joy declared desperately. Your show, Ford repeated. Joy, I hate to break it to you, but this isn't your show. And the only person disrupting anything is you. Whoopi finally found her authority. Joy, sit down. Now. Her voice carried the weight of years as the show's moderator, and even Joy couldn't ignore it completely. But Joy was too far gone to back down gracefully. Fine, Whoopi, but I want him gone. I want him off this stage. Ford looked around the table one more time, his gaze stopping on each of the other hosts. Ladies, I want to apologize to you for how this turned out. I came here hoping to have a meaningful conversation about work that matters to me. Instead, I've been subjected to a personal attack that had nothing to do with the issues and everything to do with creating drama. He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair and draped it over his arm. Joy, I genuinely hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. But you're not going to find it by attacking people who come here in good faith. Don't you patronize me, Joy spat. Don't you dare act like you're taking the high road here. I'm not acting, Joy, Ford replied as he turned toward the exit. I'm just leaving before this gets any worse than it already has. As Ford walked away from the table, Joy made one final desperate attempt to regain control. That's right, run away. Run away when someone asks you real questions. This is what happens when Hollywood privilege meets reality. Ford paused at the edge of the set and turned back one last time. Joy, the only reality here is that you've shown your audience exactly who you are. I hope it was worth it. And with that, Harrison Ford walked off the View's set, leaving behind one of the most explosive celebrity interviews in the show's history. The remaining hosts sat in stunned silence as the cameras kept rolling, Joy breathing heavily and looking around wildly, while Whoopi tried desperately to figure out how to salvage what was left of the show. What do you think about celebrity interviews that go completely off the rails like this? Have you ever seen a host lose control of an interview this badly? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.